20 years ago, my wife and I were eating supper, had the TV on, watching CNN, and the first Gulf War began that night. And we were watching Bernard Shaw, who's not around anymore, but back then he was one of the leading CNN news people. And he and his crew happened to be in Baghdad in a hotel when the fighting, well, the bombing began. They had first a bombing campaign. And he started talking about it, and so we just quit eating, went over to watch. And I remember standing there, I didn't even sit down. It was, I mean, you were just watching a war begin right in front of you, the first, absolute first bombs being dropped. And Shaw had gone out on a balcony, which I wouldn't have done, but he did. Carried his camera crew, and it was at night, and they were showing the landscape out here with all of the bombs being dropped, and you could see them lighting up the sky as they would hit and explode. And then he just stopped talking all of a sudden and said, "Oh my God, oh my God." And you waited, what is it? And he said, "I just saw a missile go down the street in front of us and turn left." and then he started describing about what was happening. We not only were using bombers, but we were also using missiles and all kind of things at that time. It's a new kind of war by the time you get to the 1990s. In the older days, where Mr. Van Kirk was involved, you had people riding those missiles, except they were called B-17s and B-25s and B-29s. And the crews of the bombers that flew against Germany and Japan had the highest percentage number of casualties of any group in the war. The infantry had more than anybody, but they had so many more of them. By percentage I'm talking about. The only other group that came close were submariners, people who were in submarines. Those two elected groups lost more than just about anybody. You've all seen movies about it. You knew that back then it had to be done with human beings flying the planes, guiding you in, trying to get you out, dropping the bombs, all of that stuff. And there are not many of those old guys around anymore. We got one of them. That's right. We got two of them. Another one over here flew B-25s, and they're the Mitchell bombers. He was in the Pacific. You were in Europe and the Pacific. Let me get on with a quick basics. I asked him what he wanted me to introduce him. He said, "Just give me my name." I'm going to do a little bit more than that. He was born in Northumberland, Pennsylvania, February of 1921, and joined the Army Air Force. You remember back then you had different Air Forces per branch. You had a Naval Air Force, Marine Air Force, Army Air Force. So he was in the USAAF, not the United States Air Force, but United States Army Air Force. And he did that in October of 41, and in 42 flew B-17s in England, out of England, the 97th Bomb Group. And I guess between August and October he flew 11 different missions. Flew in a plane, B-17 called the Red Gremlin. And there he flew with Paul Tibbets and Tom Farrahy, both of whom were with him on the Enola Gay, the B-29, later. They separated and then they all ended up getting back together. From 42 to 43, he flew out of North Africa, 58 total missions. And then 43, latter part of 43 and 44, he was an instructor, navigator instructor back here in the United States. And then in November of 44 through June of 45, they selected him and this other group to be the trainees to fly B-29s with a special mission. And so he spent a good bit of time training and what to do and how to do it, and they had a very special crew that they put together for that. On August the 6th, 1945, the Enola Gay, Mr. Van Kirk, Captain Van Kirk at the time I think it was navigating, taking them into Hiroshima. And that's the day the first bomb was dropped. He stayed with the Army up until August of '46, when he retired from the service as a major. He had won the Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, and 15 air medals during that period. He qualifies as by any definition, as a genuine hero, although he won't talk about being a hero at all. After he leaves the Air Force, and remember, he's doing all of this when he's your student. You guys, he's your age. I mean, you think about your age, your people all around, a little older, but not much older, in his 20s, early to mid-20s is when this is happening. Pretty much like they're doing in Iraq and Afghanistan now. So old folks like us, we don't fight wars. It's you young guys that have to go do that. He got out, though, and took advantage of the GI Bill, went to Bucknell University, got a PS and an MS in chemical engineering, went to work for DuPont, and ended up with his life being post-war successful. And he has agreed to come and talk to us today, so I'll cut this whole thing short and turn it over to, was it Major Theodore? What do you want to be called?
I don't care.
Just be quiet and let you talk. Okay. All right, Theodore Van Kirk.
My wife just hollered, hey, you. No. I'm sitting here, folks, because I can't stand up. That's a good reason, I guess. At 91 years old, I guess I can't stand up anymore. I made a mistake. On January 4th, I went in for a knee operation. I haven't stood up since. But so much for knee operations and knee replacements. I told Dave I would come and do this if I could sit down while I was doing it. So that's the reason I'm sitting here. And sir, you flew the B-25. Where did you fly B-25s?
I was in New Guinea, all up to the...
Oh, no. You weren't down there, were you? In 2 weeks, I'm going to fly up to Charlotte with a fella who owns a B-25. Larry Kelly. Do you know the man?
No, I know it did in Florida.
Well, he took, while we were at an air show one time, this was about a year ago, we asked him to take our co-pilot over in England and Africa for a ride. The guy with Dick Wiley was blind at the time. Blind as a bat. Larry Kelly put him in his B-25, flew all for the whole mission. They took off with everything else with Larry Kelly's left hand on Dick's right. Dick was flying the airplane. And they had come in and made a landing. They says, I remember the tower asked him, do you want to change seats before you land? He says, no, I can handle it. And this sort of thing. They came in and made a landing, and I later told Dick Wiley it was the best landing he ever made. In a B-25 or a B-17. I'm not going to tell you what Dick Wiley said to me, but if he could have found me, he was blind, remember, if he could have found me, he'd have killed me, I think. So much for the preliminaries. Let me tell you a little bit about the B-29 and what we were doing at the time. If you go over to the Pacific today, you're going to be flying, you could fly over the Marianas Islands. You would see on the island of Tinian, which at the time was the biggest airfield in the world in terms of B-29s. We had B-29s on Tinian, we had B-29s on Guam, we had B-29s on Saipan. We get those B-29s off on those missions over Japan every 45 seconds per plane. We get a plane in the air. It was the biggest traffic jam you ever saw in your life. Fortunately, they were all going in the same direction, so they weren't running into each other. That's all I can say about that. Lo and behold, to a guy that had engine trouble and decided to turn around and go back to base because he was flying against the wedge of formation, and he could run into someone very, very easily. But if you fly over those that airfield today, and you look down at the island of Tinian, you'll see two just plain dirt strips that hasn't overgrown yet. One of them was a loading pit for our uranium-235 bomb, which was our bomb. The bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. The second one was your loading pit for the plutonium bomb, which is the one they dropped on Nagasaki. If you look at those two things, that, folks, is where World War II ended. Right there. Until when those two bombs were dropped, the war was over. There's never a more defining place in the world of when a war started and when a war ended. It started at Pearl Harbor and it ended over there. And that's the most defining place yet for where it was. Okay, going back a few months before that, we got into it about November of the year before, 1944, and started training to drop atomic bombs. Now, we had a lot of problems. Number one, the first problem was we had nothing lifted to that altitude. How are you going to get it up there? We decided, the people decided at first that we were going to use a British bomber. Fortunately, we threw that out the window, because if we wouldn't have thrown it out the window, I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have gone on that with carrying one of those things. And we finally decided you could carry an atomic bomb using a stripped-down B-29. That is a B-29 that had all the turrets and all the weight taken out of it. By the time we finished with our B-29s, we had a B-29 that was 1,600 pounds lighter. They would get up higher and go faster and run away from almost any fighter at that altitude than everything else. We had a bomber that could get up there and not be bothered by fighters and could run away from almost anything that did bother them. There is a book written, by the way. I'm going to sit while I'm thinking of this, I'll tell you about it. There is a book written and being sold by the Smithsonian Institution. The book was written by Jake Beezer, and this was one of the footnotes it says in there, that a Japanese fighter came up, flew alongside of us for a minute or two, did a slow roll around us. I don't know what he was flying. Nothing he could keep up with, let alone fly with us. And then turn around and go home. If you ever see that book, you tell Jake Beezer, even though you're dead, you're a liar. Nobody ever came up and did anything like that. We saw no fighters. We had no opposition whatsoever. We trained, and then it went over, and I'm not going to give you details of our training because I don't remember them. Next time, 92 years old and everything else. But we trained all this time for the dropping of the atomic bomb, flying high altitude, making a U-turn, putting distance between us and the bomb when the bomb exploded. But if we'd have been too close to it, I wouldn't be here today, fellas. If I'd have been in the vortex, in the center of the bomb where it exploded, I would not be here. The first crew that dropped a hydrogen bomb is no living anymore. They were all killed and everything of that type. These things happen and could happen and everything at that time. We were lucky. We worked out a formula to get away from the bomb. The formula was just make a 150-degree turn to the right, put the nose down 2,000 feet so to gain altitude, get up speed, and just run like hell. That's not a nice word, but that's what we were doing. We were getting away from the bomb and not getting too close to the bomb. If we'd have been, the scientists told us, if we had been closer to the bomb, we were 20 miles away when the bomb exploded. The scientists told us if we had been 18 miles away, it would have taken the airplane with it. We didn't think that was a good idea. So we made sure we were going to get far enough away before the bomb exploded. That was exactly how we dropped the bomb. That was exactly how they dropped the bomb at Nagasaki. A little bit about the bombs. We had two different types of bombs. You probably didn't know that and everything else. We had a uranium-235 bomb. The fissionable material in our bomb was uranium-235. There was only one isotope of uranium-235 that would sustain an atomic chain reaction. They had to separate that isotope from all other isotopes. If you go into the, I don't think you can in, but if you could get in, to the mill up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, you will find that they had big cyclotrons up there that were shaped like, just like a U. At the top of that thing was just like a U. Women used to stand at the bottom of that cyclotron and adjust the current to it exactly right so that only one isotope out of all the isotopes of uranium, I think there are about 25 or so, would go over and be caught in a bucket to get U-235 for our bomb. That's how they got the uranium-235 for our bomb. They finally decided they had enough on the day we dropped it. The second odd bomb was made out of plutonium. We learned how to make the atomic bombs out of plutonium as well as U-235. Plutonium was well known, it was cheap, lots of it and everything else. That's what fooled the Japanese into thinking we only had one bomb. Because they had their program based on U-235 and they were basing it as the fact that if we only had one bomb, that's the kind of bomb we had, and we only had enough of it for one bomb, so we could go ahead and make them if we wanted to. We could only damage one city or anything at that time. The second one we dropped was a plutonium bomb, and that was a clincher to the Japanese that we had more than one bomb. Shortly after that, they made peace and everything else. But there were two types of bombs there, the uranium-235 bomb and the plutonium. All subsequent bombs have been plutonium bombs. I mean, uranium bombs. All subsequent bombs were uranium-235 bombs. Minnesota. So if anybody ever tells you to drop an atomic bomb again, they're talking about a plutonium U-235 bomb. Very hard, difficult to make, and everything else. Okay, come the time to drop the bomb. We had a group with us called the Capital. Yeah, what the devil was the name of that group? Not only am I 91 years old, I'm forgetting everything I know. But anyhow, they had a group over on Tinian that was there to assemble the bombs and to put them together and to make them work. We had guys in that group called Fermi. I can't pronounce his name, but he's a great mathematician. Anyhow, and we took all these people and we had all these people over there, some of these scientists over there. We split the scientific group. Part of them went over there with us, part of them stayed here. They put the bomb together and assembled it and everything else and loaded it on our airplane. All we had to do was go out on the airplane and get on it and everything else. They loaded the bomb and we had everything ready to go the day before. And we were going to take off at 2:45. Everything started at 2:45 for Christ's sake. But everything, and we were going to take off at 2:45 for Japan. I had worked it backwards. Hiroshima was here, we were here. I'd worked it backwards so that was the right time to take off. The day of the opening, you expect something big. You expect something like Hollywood. I'm sure you do. And all I can say is it was not like Hollywood at all. Nothing ever is. Hollywood lives in a world of its own. That's all I can say about that. You think they're going to be a great big show and everything of that type. It's just a plain old, do your work, carry out the job, and get it done. That's all there is to it. So these people were there and they had loaded a bomb, we got it all ready to go and everything of that type. And all we had to go out and do was get in the plane. The bomb was loaded in a pit. You could not load this bomb by running it under the airplane. The airplane was not high enough or the bomb was too high, one of the two. You had to put this bomb down in a pit, like you load the old grease your old cars and everything else. Lower the bomb, then park the airplane over the bomb, get it just right, and everything else will raise the bomb into the airplane. That was the way you got this bomb loaded. I hope they have better ways than that. I know they have better ways than that today and everything else. But that's the way you loaded them back in those days. Loaded them over the pit. You weren't going to obviously load too many if you were going to load them like that. We had a briefing the day before, about 10 o'clock in the morning. They told us all what we were going to do, who was going to do it, and all that sort of stuff. And then they told us to go get some sleep. How they expected to tell you were going to go out and drop the first atomic bomb, might not live through it, by the way, and everything else, to go get some sleep was absolutely beyond me. I know I sat up and played poker all night. Why did I know that? Because Tibbetts and Fairby were in the same poker game. And I don't even know who won. That's how bad it was. And this sort of thing. Then at 2:45, we get a final breakfast. Tibbetts always liked pineapple fritters. I hated the damn thing. We had pineapple fritters for that breakfast that morning. Tibbetts was still the commanding officer. Then we got in a truck and went down to the flight line. And we get down to the flight line was our first surprise. There were people around I had never seen before. Keep in mind, they were not media people. The media was not on the island at all. They were all brought in by the Manhattan Project to document things for their Manhattan Project use. I always said it was to protect General Groves' backside if things went wrong, but that was not the case. There was no media on the island, only people from the Manhattan Project. And after we got rid of all those guys, there were people doing interviews, pictures, and everything else. All these pictures that you see floating around now from the Manhattan Project were all taken by the Manhattan Project on that morning out there. All those pictures you buy and everything at that time. We got in the airplane about 2:45. Tibbetts told them, please move all the cameras and get out of the way. And then with everything else, we'll get off the ground. And then our flight up to Hiroshima was very uneventful. We stayed low altitude because Captain Parsons, Navy Captain Parsons, Deke Parsons, was going to arm the bomb in flight. That meant he was going to take out the black powder that was going to drive forward a piece of uranium tightly milled to fit into another piece of uranium up here. It was going to exceed the critical mass, and we were going to get our explosion. That's simple as that. One cannon firing into another cannon. And Deke was an expert on it. So we had to stay at low altitude though. He went back in. When he came out of the bomb bay, he was back in the bomb bay. If he had fallen, there was nothing there to stop him but the bomb bay doors, and they wouldn't have stopped him. He'd have gone right on through them and everything else. That was the kind of things they were doing, they were doing, I should say, while they were getting ready to drop this bomb. Then we got to Iwo Jima, we started getting more altitude and climbing very slowly. We climbed at an altitude of 31,000 feet that day. Now I hear of a lot of people now, in this day and age, who said that they flew top cover for us. I don't know how they were flying top cover for us. We were as high as we could get, for crying out loud. They couldn't have gotten any higher than us, but they were flying top cover for us. I had a guy in we are in Alabama now, aren't we? Yeah. The guy over here in almost through Birmingham, who said he flew, his obituary is all written about how he flew top cover for us. And how he got up above us and everything of that. I don't know where the hell this guy, he had a great imagination. He had a great imagination and everything. But we find all kind of people that do things like that. If everybody who said they were on the Enola Gay really had been on the Enola Gay that day, we would have needed a fleet of 727 to carry them all. There were 13 people on the airplane that day, and we couldn't have got another guy because we had Parsons and Jepson sitting on the floor and everything of that type. We made a trip to Hiroshima. We crossed Shikoku. We crossed the Inland Sea. We crossed into the Japan proper. I could visualize the city of Hiroshima from 50 miles away. I could see it, pick it up. So went in just to the east of Hiroshima, made a left-hand turn, through a westerly heading into the city of Hiroshima. Tom Fearby, I got the wind for him. He picked the city up right away and says, I have it, and sat there. He was saying, he says, if he turned around to me while we were on the bomb run and says, Dutch, if we'd ever sat on the bomb run this long and when we were into Japan, into Tokyo, into some of the cities over in Europe, I'd have been dead. You'd have been with me, of course, but that's all right. And that sort of thing. Because we sat on a bomb run so long that we just had no opposition whatsoever. We went in, dropped the bomb. The minute the bomb left, we all had goggles we put on, darkened goggles. The first thing I saw was Tibbitz's goggles flying back by me at first, because he could not see to fly the airplane and wear the goggles to him. He made a right-hand turn. He lost about 2,000 feet in the turn, leveled out to get up, build up speed and everything else, and we just ran like hell. That's how we got 20 miles away. We were about 20 miles away when the bomb exploded. We got a lot of jolts in the airplane and everything else. The tail gunner called up and says, that was a shock wave, there's another one coming. He set up visible shock waves, and he could tell us when they were going to hit the airplane. Now it's over. All this happened in a minute. It's all over now. So we turn around and take a look at what had happened. We could not visualize anything in the city of Hiroshima whatsoever. The city was covered with a cloud. Looked like every piece of dust, every piece of dirt, every crummy piece of debris had been picked up and was flying through the air. We couldn't identify it, but it was flying through the air. We knew what it was. You could make no visual observation whatsoever because the entire city was covered with debris, dust, and smoke. All you could see out in the periphery of the city, you could see some small fires still burning from the bomb. So we flew around a little bit in the southeast quadrant and decided we could not see anything to report, so we just turned around and went home. On the way back to Hiroshima, we were letting down slowly. I could still see the large white cloud that had formed over the city of Hiroshima, 161 miles away. I was looking for it as long as it was making a note of when I could see it. 161 miles away, at 15,000 feet, we could see the cloud from the city of Hiroshima. That was this turbulence that kicked up and what happened in the city. You can imagine what happened to the people down there. The only thing to compare, I can compare it to, in the recent times, was a recent tsunami that they had, which destroyed that power plant over there. That they're now trying to want to reopen and everything else. That was almost as bad as the city of Hiroshima and everything else. Well, we got back to Hiroshima and we got a lot of, everyone was out to meet us and everything else. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. All I wanted to do was go to bed and this sort of thing. So we had to go to debriefing. We had more generals and admirals were there to meet us than any other place I'd ever been. If the Japanese had dropped a bomb on our briefing tower, briefing room, at that briefing, we would have ended the war right there. All of our generals would have been dead. We had 8 generals in the room at the same time. And everybody wanted to know. It was more like a drinking party than it was a debriefing. So, and they had free hot dogs. They gave free hot dogs and free beer to the crew. I didn't even get there to get any free hot dogs and free beer. That's how late I was. But a little funny incident did happen. Dick Jepson was Parsons' assistant. He didn't have to go to briefing. So he went back to his tent. He just wandered back to his tent. And he wandered into the tent, and there were a bunch of Navy guys in there. And so they had a bull session, as everybody did when they got together over there and everything else. And they said, well, come down to our tent tonight. We have a good mess down there. We'll give you a free dinner and everything else. We had the best damn mess on the island, but that's all right. They decided, oh, I'm going down, maybe get a free dinner. So he went down there with them. After dinner, they were all sitting around in their tent, and they were comparing notes about what they did in the war. The Navy guys all said, well, I did so-and-so today, and I did so-and-so today, and I did so-and-so today. It came Dick's turn. Dick just says, we won the war today. They looked at him like, you got to be crazy, and everything else. The next morning on his newspaper, the island did put out a newspaper. The next day in the newspaper, they said, you bastard, you were right. Because they knew, too, the war was over after we dropped one bomb. The flight to Hiroshima was a much more eventful because Chuck Sweeney did not follow his orders. And that was the basic reason for it. He waited 35 minutes instead of 5 minutes to make the rendezvous with all of his planes. Then he went on to Kokura, which was a bomb that they supposed to bomb. Kokura could not be bombed. Cloud cover from a previous bombing was covering Kokura. But now they were running out of gas. His flight engineer hollered at him about, Major, you are running out of fuel. You've got to do something. Chuck finally says, okay, we're going on to Hiroshima and drop it there. They went on to Hiroshima. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, I guess I am getting old. They went on to Nagasaki. They lined up on a radar run on Nagasaki against instructions. They were not supposed to bomb by radar. But they lined up on a radar run anyhow. At the last minute, the clouds opened up. Behan saw something on the ground, and he hollered, "I see the ground, I got it." He didn't have it, he didn't have anything, for Christ's sake. But he dropped the bomb instead. The bomb hit a good 5 miles from where it was supposed to hit. Behan comes back and says, "I dropped the bomb visually." We know he didn't, he knows he didn't. But the war's over. Why are we going to argue with a dead duck and everything else? So we let it go. But he missed the target by 5 miles that day. They had to land at Okinawa later and find out where they were. They knew they were in Okinawa. They had to land at Okinawa, but they landed at Okinawa, had a conference under the wing in order to find out where that bomb hit. That's the United States Air Force for you. And it's worse than that. We dropped another bomb later on at Bikini, the Bikini atom bomb test. I know, I was there, I didn't want to be. We told the bombardier who was going to drop the bomb that day that the bomb was going to drop 1,600 yards short and to the left. He did not believe us. He says, "I made my calculations, they're right." So he dropped the damn bomb. 1,600 miles short and to the left. That night, LeMay came into the party that they were having to celebrate the successful, quote, successful dropping of the bomb. And he saw us, and he said, "You guys are going to fly the pictures back to Washington. Get out of here before midnight." They didn't want people around to talk to the media for that reason. You don't hear this story about the Bikini atom bomb test. There was a gross failure. And they had 20,000 men over there. When we started talking about it, we said we need 10 airplanes and 300 men. They had 20,000 men over there and still goofed up like that. They should have all been court-martialed and everything else, for Christ's sake. The show that they put on. Now, they did have a successful underwater test, but hell, anybody can know where they put a bomb underwater, under a ship. If they can't, they're in worse shape than I am. So that in itself was also a failure. We did not have a successful atom bomb bombing until after Hiroshima, or anything of that type. Now I'm going to shut up, get a drink of water, and answer some of your questions. I'm sure you have some. If you don't, I'll go home. I just assume Any questions? Good, I'm out of here. Okay, you. Yes, sir.
Did you know I know this is weird, but my uncle was involved with
I can't hear you.
my uncle was involved. Did you know a Donald Worthy? Could you come down here?
Either come down. Dave, do you have one of my books? You have one? I can find it. If he was in our outfit, I have a roster of him. I can find it. What was the name again?
Lieutenant Colonel Donald Worthy. He was involved in the bombing.
No, he wasn't.
He developed a formula or something. He was involved.
He might have been involved in making the bomb or something like that, but he wasn't involved in dropping the bomb.
He wasn't in the drop, but he was involved in something else.
I have a roster of the 509th group. Yeah, pass it up to that man, see if he can find these uncles there.
You talk about silver plate.
Silver plate? I did. Yes, I did. I said the bomb dropped 1,600 feet short and to the left.
The silver plate code name that Tibbetts could use to get
But I can't remember everything. What Dave is remembering was that we had a code name of silver plate. And When we invoked the code name of Silver Plate, we were supposed to get anything we wanted that the Air Force had, obviously. We decided we wanted 20 new B-29s to go overseas with. So we put something in for 20 new B-29s built to our specifications, stripped down, everything taken out of the plane itself, and all that sort of thing. Tibbetts was turned down for them. So he invoked it again. This time he invoked the code name Silver Plate. He was turned down again, surprisingly enough. And this time, somebody, Hap Arnold, happened to find out that we had requested them. We got our 20 new B-29s. But the story goes that Hap Arnold had a staff meeting every morning in his office. And he would, as the guys come in, he'd stand by the door and greet them all. Good morning, General so-and-so. Good morning, General so-and-so. They were all generals. What the heck? And this sort of thing. This guy walked in who was a lieutenant general. I mean, a major general. He said, good morning, Cat Major. He reduced him in rank right down to a major. I don't know how long he stayed there, but he reduced him in rank down to a major. He says, do I have to tell any of the rest of you what a request from that group means? It means they get it. They get it now, as soon as we can get it anyway. Did you find it yet?
No, I'm looking at.
I told you he wasn't there.
Tell us some formula or something, they was involved, or something else.
I get, no, I'm gonna, never mind. I was going to say I got bombed a bit myself over there, but I won't say it. You had a question of meantime.
You mentioned that there was a third bomb, or a third dropping. Was the Bikini Atoll, was that after Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
We had a third bomb back at Wendover. We could have gotten out there and used it if we could have gotten it there in time. LeMay asked us when we were down in his office that morning, do you fellas have a third bomb? Do you fellas have another one of those things? That's the way it was. And we said, yes, sir, we have a third one back at Wendover. He says, get it out here. And you fellas are going to drop it. The war ended. We never did get the third bomb out there. But we had a crew back at Wendover to get it and bring it out there. And we could have made one at the rate of about one a month thereafter. That would have been our production rate thereafter.
The purpose of dropping then on Bikini Atoll was practice, or?
We never dropped an atomic bomb on Bikini Atoll. We never dropped an atomic bomb any place except Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The other bombs were pumpkin bombs. That's another word I didn't explain too. But these were bombs that were the same size, weight, and shape as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But it was loaded with high explosives rather than atomic energy. That was a pumpkin. And that's what was dropped every other place that a bomb was dropped except Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
I seem to remember the names of the bombs were Fat Man
And Little Boy.
I'm sorry?
Fat Man and Little Boy.
Little,
Yep. I always said that was for General Parsons, not Parsons, who was the general in charge of the Manhattan Project there? General Groves. He was a fat man, obviously. And Little Boy was LeMay, the scientist in charge. He was very skinny, but very smart.
Got a question over here.
Yes, sir?
She has a question. She's too shy.
Oh, did he stick it on you?
But in the beginning, when you first started talking, you said the Japanese didn't think that
have more than one bomb,
Yes,
but we didn't have the plutonium? What, so, but.
I told you
uranium,
we dropped a U-235 bomb.
and then you dropped the plutonium one too.
We dropped they dropped a plutonium bomb. All subsequent bombs were plutonium bombs.
That you dropped.
No,
Or
that they dropped.
Oh, they dropped the plutonium on us?
Yes.
Where?
Here's Nagasaki.
The other crew. The other crew.
The other crew dropped it.
This crew dropped an atomic bomb, U-235. The Nagasaki crew dropped U-238. In fact, I believe all the U-235 that existed in the world was blown up in that first bomb.
Yep. Every ounce of 235 made at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, all the things that were going out of there, they carried out in a suitcase. Yes, sir.
How big were the bombs, the size of weight?
Biggest bomb, there was about from here down to the end of the table, and 28 inches in diameter for ours. Theirs was more egg-shaped, more wider and egg-shaped.
How much did it weigh about?
10,000 pounds, roughly 10,000. We were grossly overloaded when we took off for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Why? Because we put the bomb in the front bomb bay, then we had to put the corresponding weight in the back bomb bay to get our weight bounce level correct, and everything else. So on takeoff, you were grossly overloaded. Once you burned off some of your fuel, you were okay. But it took us about an hour to get rid of that excess fuel. Sweeney had another problem. Sweeney could not transfer gas from his bomb bay to his wing tank. He said he was mistaken because he didn't know that they could do it. Yes, sir.
At the time, did you know that you were going to be making such an impact?
Did I know I was going to drop an atomic bomb?
No, that you're going to make such an impact in history, or did it come?
Oh, hell no, I wouldn't have done it if I did. It's been can you imagine today, just today, I had two guys in my house, Dave. I don't mind Dave coming to my house, he can come anytime. But another guy who came to get a book and this sort of thing. But I had two guys in my house. But that is not unusual. Guys come and just say, oh, I was in the neighborhood, I thought I'd drop in and see you. What if I'm not dressed? And everything. But you are at the mercy of the public people. You would be amazed at the number of requests I get for autographs. The people think they own you. They own you. Sign this, please. They don't. Does anybody ever send me a $1 bill for a beer? Huh? I don't have anything of that. Just sign this. It's almost a command and everything else. Now there are people who want things and everything. They do compensate you for them, but believe me, I haven't got many beers. It's not been good. Somebody up in here had a question, I think. Question?
She had one, this young lady here.
Well, I can't find her. Where is she? Oh, there you are.
That's the first time I've heard that in my life. Someone couldn't see me. I have a question. How did you feel after you dropped the bomb and were in the safe zone?
What is that again? I test how we dropped the bomb and
How did you feel when you figured out you were in the safe zone, that you were okay?
we dropped the bomb and what now?
How did you feel when you were in the safe zone, when you knew you were safe after dropping the bomb?
Hey, I was happy. We were living. I think everybody was. Because, Tibbetts had a cyanide tablet for everybody on the crew. He said, Tibbetts says, I could have given everybody on the crew a cyanide tablet. I just said you'd have had a hell of a time getting me to take a cyanide. That's all I can say. I planned, Fairby and I know Tom and I were very close. Tom and I always expected to live. through the dropping of the atomic bomb. We thought we didn't know how we were going to do it. Then I realized how close we were going to be to it and everything else. But somehow or other, by God, we were going to live through that. And we did. Yes, ma'am.
When did you know that you were going to be involved in dropping the atomic bomb?
I still can't hear you, ma'am.
When did you know you were going to be involved in dropping the atomic bomb?
I found out about October of the year before. Yeah. Paul Tippett, I found out when I was in New Orleans. What a way to go. But I was in New Orleans and Paul Tippett called me and he says, we're going to do something new. He says, I got a group, a special group. He says, we're do something special. And he said, I can't tell you what it is, but if it works, we're either going to win the war or have a substantial effect on the war. We had a substantial effect on the war. Yeah. Go ahead.
Were you specially qualified to do it? How did that
I was living, that's all I was. No, I don't know how the Army, the Air Force, picked out people for various things. I had no special qualifications for this job whatsoever. Yes, I was a good navigator. Yes, I could get a bomb at an airplane from Tinian to Hiroshima on time and on course and everything at that time. I knew my way around the skies and the ocean and everything. But I had no special qualifications beyond that. I knew celestial navigation, and I knew how to guide the airplane and everything at that time. But beyond that, that's it.
And you were 22 or so?
What's that again?
You were 22 or so?
I was 24 at the time.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, way back.
What did you do after the war?
I went, wherever there, he's sitting over here, see. I went back to school at Bucknell University. I went into a classroom just like this and studying quantitative analysis. Jesus, do I still learn that stuff? And I got a degree, a master's degree in chemical engineering and took a job with DuPont. And that was my history.
A couple of questions over there.
We're over here, there we are.
Can you speak to your feelings as far as looking back now?
I can't hear you.
Can you speak to your feelings looking back now as to how the effect it had on the Japanese community as far as, did you have any idea that kind of aftermath would take place after dropping such a weapon?
I can't hear you.
How do you feel about the effects it had on Japan? Did you know it would have such an effect on people of Japan when you dropped the bomb?
No. You want any more? No, but let me tell you. I have become a great friend of the Japanese. A bunch of us have. Hap Haller. Now, Hap had it worse than I did. He was in a B-29, shot down over Tokyo, put on display in the Japanese zoo without any clothes on. Hap Haller just died about 2 weeks ago here. I never went through anything like that. But I have learned to know the Japanese and respect them. In my business dealings, I did an awful lot with the Japanese. I had a Japanese young man, I would guess he was maybe 10 years older than I was, come up to me one day and say, "Thank you for dropping the bomb." I said, "Why? I wanted to kill a bunch of your people and everything." He says, "You saved me from a life of serfdom." He says, "I was a poor Japanese farmer beforehand." He says, "If you had not dropped the bomb, I would have been a Japanese farmer for the rest of my life. You saved me from that. I am now president of my company, and this sort of thing. And you've got a fair amount of this in Japan. People who got opportunities who did not have them before and who took advantage of them. You've got a fair amount of this. Hap Halloran went over to Japan to meet the people who put him on display in their zoo and made friends with them and taught them how to live their new life. The Japanese we deal with today are nowhere near what the Japanese were like that we fought in World War II. Nowhere near it. These people are good people. They're friendly people. When we lived in California, we lived out there for 20 years. Out of 12 of those years, we had Japanese students living with us every year for the summer. And enjoying every, there used to be a crowd, and they, you know, about 20 people would probably get Japanese students living with them and around the area. And the Japanese students would come over and, well, sometimes it was fun. I had one teach me to make spinach souffle one time. I never did learn to make spinach souffle, but that's all right. No, but these people were fine people. They're good people and lovely people. To this day, I have good friends over there and everything else. And I will never say anything bad about it. Did I answer your question? I get on rambling a lot of times.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right behind you now.
Can you describe the sound after the...
There was no sound.
Was no sound?
No, when the bomb exploded, we did not hear a thing. You would have thought an explosion of that size, you would have heard something. Over the roar of the engines in the airplane. And remember, we were revved up, we were gone and everything at that time. But over the roar of the engines and everything, we could not hear a thing in the airplane. So you heard nothing.
How do you feel about the Smithsonian's Enola Gay exhibit?
I got it.
How do you feel about the Smithsonian's Enola Gay exhibit?
Right now, at this moment,
Sure.
at this moment, it is beautiful. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Well, go up there and see it sometime. No, you walk into the Smithsonian today. The first thing you see is Enola Gay. Incidentally, parking, oh, it's free. Parking costs you $12, but that's all right. And you walk into the thing, and the first thing you see is this large airplane sitting out there, shined up, polished up, and everything else. You ask what it is, oh, that's the Enola Gay. That's like it. The day that airplane was put in there, a fellow threw a ball of red paint at it. Excuse me. He thought he was just throwing a ball of red paint. It didn't break until it hit the floor. He thought he was going to get off easy the way everybody else did at that thing. The justice of the peace, he went before. I've known him well now. A Marine colonel, retired. The only guy that ever got justice. Why do you want to do what to an airplane like that? I go up there and I go in and see it all the time. They ask me if I want to get in it. The answer is no. Too many memories. Oh, what to?
Stop now.
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
If there are any more questions, that is.
Someone way in the back.
Did you have any contact with Paul Tibbets after the war?
All the time. Paul thought he was my commanding officer for the rest of my life. He'd call me, he'd pick up the phone, he'd call me, and he'd say, meet me in such and such a place, on such and such a time. I'd say, Paul, I can't, I work for a living. I can't just jump up and run around the way you can and everything at that time. And then Tom Ferry and I both retired. It was worse after that. But we had some good times and we had some bad times. We never had any people give us any trouble. And a lot of people, I'll tell you a little story. One lady come through the line. This was out in Salt Lake City. And Paul Tibbets and Tom Ferry and I were sitting there, and she says, "Oh, I knew you people very well when you were out of Wendover." And I says, "Oh, you did?" And she says, "Oh, yeah, I knew you very well." I says, "Well, it sounds as if you knew us extremely well when we were out of Wendover." She said, "Oh, I did know you people extremely well when you were out of Wendover." And I says, "I'm not going to go any further." But anyhow, it must have been Behan. Kermit Behan was our bombardier on the second mission. He was a character. That's all I'll say about him. We blamed everything up. Behan was the first one of us to die. He was dead, so we blamed everything on Behan. Any other questions?
Right here.
Yes, sir.
How did the Enola Gay get its name?
Paul Tibbets' mother was named Enola Gay Hammond. He said it was better to have that on the airplane than put some sexy female that they usually put on airplanes, like the Naked Virgin or somebody like that. That's the reason why it had a dignified name like Enola Gay.
How long did it take you to get back home after the bombing there?
From the bombing,
And then how were you received when like your family, your friends?
how long did that take?
I think it wants to know how long it took to get back to the U.S. and how you
Okay,
were
it took us
received.
about 6.5 hours to get up there because we were climbing. It took us about 6 hours to get back.
How were you received? Like,
Pardon,
once
can you
got
speak
back
louder?
stateside- Once you got back stateside, how were you received?
I told you they had a free beer.
He wants to know about when you got back to the United States.
Oh, we got back to the States. Well, we got back to the States, they didn't know what to do with us. But we did a lot of things. We went to Life Goes to a party. I don't know why. But anyhow, we did a lot of things. Like we were invited to everything. We were invited to a Special Army Day deal in New York and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, they wanted to do things for us. Actually, they wanted to do things for themselves, but they did it for for us under those circumstances. Yes, sir.
31,000 feet.
Yep.
Anything above 12, you've got to have oxygen, and you go higher, it gets very cold, as in minus degrees. How did you
Minus
guys
66
handle the
degrees.
oxygen?
Minus 66 degrees was our external temperature that day. I have it all in my logbook.
Did you have sufficient heating in the aircraft, or were you
Yep.
guys all bundled up?
Nope. In that area, in the B-29, we had sufficient heating. Where we did not have sufficient heating was in the B-17, because we had to take the waste windows out so in order to stick the guns out and shoot. We didn't want to shoot through the windows and anything of that type. So it was the B-17 was like flying in the tail end of the B-17, back of the bomb bays. It was like being in an open cockpit airplane. People had to endure those minus 60-degree temperatures. they would put on heated boots, heated pants, heated coveralls, and everything else. And if their electricity ever went out, they had to find a warm place or they were going to be dead. That's just where it was.
Was there a central oxygen system, or did everybody have their own bottles?
There was a central oxygen system, but everybody had their own cup too, had their own bottle. If you wanted to go from the back of the plane to the front of the plane, you had to disconnect your oxygen, connect it into a bottle, and carry the bottle with you. On the B-17, that is. Flying a B-29 is like flying in a Cadillac. Well, gentlemen, I thank you very much. And I don't know what, I hope you learned something you didn't know before and everything of the type. I learned I'm very forgetful and everything. But I'll try to remember the things I forgot before. If you'll forgive me. Thank you.